Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore. At Baltimore Positive, we are positively into what is a short week of football, but a long week of crab cake eating. The Maryland Crab Cake Tour will be coming to Timonium on Friday at the Knicks Grandstand Grill. Looking forward to it. I was out there the other day. Did not have a crab cake, but it was a great party. Shout out to Paul King and Gary Rissling and Joe Carroll and a whole bunch of local guys, Joey Slivka, a lot of guys that I've done business with out of Rockin' at the races. We will be back on Friday doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by the Maryland Lottery. Let yourself play. That'll be Friday from 2 until 5. If you have a chance to hear our mother's conversations from last week down in Federal Hill. Great conversations. All that will be out. Luke Broadwater from the New York Times and Brooke Learman, who's running for comptroller. But in the meantime, pretty big football week around here. The Ravens win a big game on Monday night. Miracle win. Defense wasn't very good. Offense was amazing at the end. And Lamar Jackson, not enough words, but look, we've talked about the offensive line and the running game being a problem. We've assessed the defense and Tavon Young and penalties and all of that stuff. We have not talked about the people catching the ball, because when Lamar Jackson's throwing the ball for 400 yards, there are some receivers out there having 100-yard nights, right, or days, given where we are at this point. And this is a nice time to talk about, I think, Eric DeCosta in drafting, where these guys are, how they brought players in, and given Lamar weapons. We talked about it after the Buffalo game last year. Who is he going to throw the ball to, and are they going to catch it?
Yeah, I mean, you think back to a certain future Hall of Fame quarterback's wife once famously said, "What do you want him to do? Throw it and catch it?" Talking about Tom Brady and Giselle at one point in time way back when. But I mean, Mark Andrews, it's crazy. We know how good he's been. I mean, he showed signs even before Lamar Jackson became the quarterback his rookie year. I mean, he showed some chemistry with Joe Flacco even very early on, and it was pretty apparent early that he's a guy that should have been the first-round pick rather than Hayden Hurst. And Hayden Hurst had a nice day on Sunday and has gone on to play in Atlanta, and nothing against him, but it's very clear who the winning pick was out of those two guys. It was Mark Andrews in the third round, but it was crazy to think going into this game on Monday night, counting the postseason, Andrews had gone 8 straight games without a touchdown, which is just crazy when you consider, I went back and looked at it, he had caught 17 over his previous 27 regular season games. I mean, this guy has always done is catch touchdowns, and we've talked about that for a couple of years now. It's why he was a Pro Bowl tight end 2 years ago. But he had gotten off to a good start, was on pace for over 1,000 receiving yards, but hadn't found the end zone yet this year. Well, they remedied that on Monday night, and he catches 2 touchdowns, catches 2 two-point conversions, which can't imagine that's happened too often, where a guy has caught 2 touchdowns and also 2 two-point conversions in a football game, and doing all of that in one quarter. So pretty crazy, but 11 catches, 147 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, just an absolutely outstanding performance, career high for him in receptions. It was a new Ravens record for most receiving yards by a tight end. Todd Heap, way back when, had 146 against Pittsburgh back in 2002, looking at the Ravens game notes. So, I mean, just a monster performance from him, and also Marquise Brown. As much as the Detroit game was a disaster for him, and you're wondering, how's he going to respond to this? And we'd seen him have some periods of time, some spells where he had a couple issues catching the football, like we saw in Detroit. How's he going to respond to this? And well, you look at what he did in Denver, catching the diving long touchdown catch, and then what he did on Monday night. Just, he was excellent. 9 catches under 25 yards, 2 touchdowns for him, including the game winner. And now you look at Marquise Brown, and we talked about this at the end of last year, but it's carried over into the first 5 games of this season. Over his last 11 regular season games, Nestor, 54 catches, 789 yards, 11 touchdowns. And keep in mind, 2 good playoff performances as well. That's not included in that. I mean, this is a guy that, as much as we might belabor the point and say, well, he's not a true number one in the sense that you think of, I don't know, Tyreek Hill, other great, Devontae Adams, guys like that.
The question would be whether you would burn your one on him based on production. And to your point, we talked about Hayden Hurst. We talked about Brashad Perryman and Rashad Bateman. Like, what is a number one Lamar being the last pick of the first round has clearly overperformed that status. I was watching Carson Wentz out there running around on Monday night thinking, the Eagles burned a pick on him. He looked pretty good in the second and third quarter there for a little while, right? But is Hollywood Brown a one? I mean, in this offense, given the way they want to use him, if he caught every ball that was thrown his way during his career, we'd be talking about him in a different light, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like I said, though, if you look at the last 11 games now, which is 2/3 of a season, roughly.
And he had a bad game in there.
Right, exactly.
Dropped 100 yards worth of balls in one of those games.
He has 11 touchdowns over his last 11 regular season games and plenty of production there. So remember, there's a scale here. Good first-round pick doesn't mean it's the guy becomes Ray Lewis or Lamar Jackson. Good first-round pick can be Jimmy Smith. Jimmy Smith was a good first-round pick when you consider he's still with the team a decade later. Now, he's not going to be a Ring of Honor guy. He's never made a Pro Bowl, although you could certainly argue a couple years he could have made one had he gotten enough attention. But injuries aside, that was still, you say yes, that was a good pick. I mean, Jimmy Smith's helped them win a lot of games over the years, even with his injuries. So, if the scale is somewhere, if Jimmy Smith's kind of, or Ben Grubbs, as you mentioned, another good example there, is on the lesser end of the scale in terms of good first-round picks, and Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Jonathan Ogden, and I'll even say Terrell Suggs, Lamar Jackson, let's say, on the opposite end of that great spectrum of first-round picks. I think Marquise Brown is on track to at least say good first-round pick. Maybe not a bona fide number one, but he wasn't taken in the top 5. So you're not, you're not guaranteed to get, it's not Calvin Johnson that you're drafting very, very early. So I think you have to
Calvin
be
Ridley.
Sure. Well, he was middle of the first round, right? So I mean, it's very encouraging to see what they're getting, and you go into Devin Duvernay, Sammy Watkins is a veteran pickup. It's kind of amazing. I saw a few people note it based on what happened Sunday. Juju Smith-Schuster, the injury to him, the Ravens are trying to sign him. They tried to sign T.Y. Hilton, who still hasn't played yet because of an injury. He's been on IR, although expected to come back for the Colts. But you think about these other guys that the Ravens were in on to varying degrees. I mean, even they had a conversation, at least with Atlanta earlier in the offseason, about Julio Jones before he ultimately gets dealt after the draft and goes to Tennessee. You look at all those guys compared to how Sammy Watkins had performed, and we'll see what happens with the hamstring. Of course, he missed the rest of the game, and you hope he's not out too long. But even that has worked out. And the Ravens are doing all these things with their passing game, which isn't just becoming a good passing game for the Ravens' run first standard. It's becoming a good passing game, period.
Which is what you always had talked about. When we get to that efficiency level where Lamar can go 43 or 49 for 400, this is what he did on Monday night, what he needed to do, right? Because the only way you pass the ball that much, and we've talked about this, when Lamar throws the ball 50 times, you lost, or you were getting your ass kicked. I mean, so this was necessary. This wasn't they would rather be running the ball. They would rather be playing that style from 2 years ago. The fact that they could win a gunfight with a knife, literally, on Monday night was, an outlier, because they can't do this every week, and they're not going to do it against a good team down 3 touchdowns.
Well, yes, an outlier in the sense that you can't expect Lamar Jackson to complete 37 of 43.
Because it's never been done in the history of the game, like literally, right?
Well, but at the same time, there are quarterbacks throw for 400 yards in this league. I mean, there are 5,000-yard passers in the league now. I mean, 4,000 used to be a magic number.
They start in the first quarter trying to get there. They don't start in the first quarter trying to get a 100-yard rushing game, which they failed, by the way, which is lost in all of this. But the fact that they threw for 300 yards in the second half means they were losing by 3 touchdowns, because there's no other way they would attempt to do that. And they haven't been in that position before. So these stats are indicative of how bad they were getting their ass kicked. Let's not forget that. That's the reason Lamar threw the ball 50 times.
Well, sure. At the same time, though, if this had been a back and forth game, though, if you're not running the ball well, you're going to have to throw it. He threw 43 times. That's not – and let's be clear, that's most quarterbacks in the league when they're throwing 40, 45, 50 times. Even Andy Reid would tell you with the Chiefs, and I'm not talking about the present Chiefs. I'm talking about the Chiefs over the last 3 years where they've had so much success. even Andy Reid would say, yeah, ideally, we don't want Patrick Mahomes throwing it 45 times. We're thinking we'd like it to be 35, let's say, and we have a lead and we're running the football in the fourth quarter because we're winning. And that's when you're running the football. So, but it's so important that they've been able to show that they can win that way, because that was one of the big questions, right? Ravens can't come back if they're down multiple scores in the second half. Ravens can't win if they have to throw 40 plus times a game. Lamar Jackson can't do this, can't do that. And he's doing those things. And the point I was trying to make, talking about some of their wide receivers and what they're doing with their passing game right now, their first round pick still hasn't played yet. Rashad Bateman. So,
their $150 million tackle hasn't been on the field either.
Well,
there's all sorts of issues that they've had. They had 3 running backs gone. I mean, we can go down the list of. They had another offensive lineman carted off. On Monday night. So it's on and on and on and on. The fact that it happened is, I called it an outlier because I don't want to have to see him do it again.
Well, but is it an outlier though? I mean, why are we going to assume he can't do this again? I mean, I think he's showing. I'm not saying you want to do this every week. Let's be very clear about that. But I mean, you get into this position in January, everyone was going to say, well, the Ravens are dead in the water then. Well, look what he just did.
So if you say they're going to throw 45 times and run 25 times,
if they have to.
They have to, but they'll never plan to do that, right? That will be the plan when the other thing's not working. And it's nice to know that you have another golf club in the bag that we didn't know we had. They've always said that Lamar would throw the ball and that there would come a day like Monday night where he was capable of doing this. And now we know he's capable of doing this.
Yeah. And I mean, but I also think not just talking about extreme examples, but in general, they are throwing the ball more on first down, which is, if you want to go and assess where they were as a passing game and as an offense last year, I wrote something at BaltimorePositive.com. In fact, I linked to it this past week. Back in late January, one of the easiest things that I looked at in terms of something that you don't have to be an X's and O's savant to look at was throw the ball a little more on first down. Get in position where you set up some scenarios where you use some play fakes, because everything you've shown over the last couple of years is what? The Ravens are going to run the ball on first down. The Ravens are going to run the ball most of the time. So that should be an advantageous situation for some more passes on first down. That's not to say you pass on first down every single time, but they have thrown the ball a little bit more on first down this year than they had in the last 2 years. And it's working. And by the way, last year when they threw on first down, it showed a high success rate. So that's why, from an analytics standpoint, even a guy like me who's not, I don't have a math degree from Yale or anything like that, where I'm going to be in an analytics department in a front office. But that was something that I looked at and said, well, their success rate on running on first down last year wasn't as great as you would think, looking at what their running game was in its totality. And they actually had a lot of success throwing on first down. Why not do that a little bit more? Well, apparently someone on the staff or multiple people on the staff recognize that, because that's something they're doing. So now J.K. Dobbins going down, Gus Edwards going down, changed things quite a bit there. Ronnie Stanley going down has certainly not helped. And we don't know when he's going to come back. We don't know what Ronnie Stanley's going to look like when he comes back. I think there's a lot of unknown there. But I brought up Rashad Bateman in terms of, if you're looking at this passing game with the improvement that they've made, you add a first-round pick if he's healthy and give him some time to acclimate himself and build some chemistry with Lamar Jackson. There's a higher ceiling there. There's still some more potential to tap into there, and that's what's exciting here. Yes, ideally, you don't want to have to depend on your quarterback to go 37 of 43 to win a football game, but we've talked about it. At some point in time, teams are going to contain your running game, and that doesn't mean they've solved it. Doesn't mean they've, quote, figured out Lamar Jackson, as we've heard some silliness around the league and some reports and unnamed sources around the league speculating this was going to be the year that teams figured out Lamar Jackson. But what teams do develop over time, in the same way we're seeing it now with Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes, is some best practices that can contain you and slow you down a little bit more. And some of the things that you had wild success over, maybe now not quite as successful, or now you've got to vary things a little bit more. So we're seeing the Ravens, just like Kansas City's going to have to adjust if they're going to climb out of an early 2-3 hole. in the AFC West. But we're seeing the Ravens evolve, right? This is all about the revolution, the evolution, and doing something
we haven't heard revolution. Whoa. You just used the revolution word. Harbaugh hadn't used that one in 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Literally.
But we're seeing an offense that continues to evolve. And a lot of it's been out of necessity this year, but we said it. Even if you had J.K. Dobbins, even if Gus Edwards was on the field, even if Ronnie Stanley had never hurt his ankle, they were going to have to evolve. They weren't going to just be able to roll out the same game plan week after week after week that worked so well in 2019, because teams are going to focus on trying to stop you and try to contain
like the Chiefs,
you.
Literally.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, it's not that you've been solved or figured out permanently. It's that teams develop best practices, right? I mean, best practices that's a buzz term that's used in just about any business, right? You and I have talked about best practices using social media, for example, but that's always a moving target, and you can't always anticipate what the variables are going to be. But in the Ravens case, we knew even if they were going to run for 3,000 yards for a third straight year, there was going to come a time, in the same way that it did 2 years ago against Tennessee in the postseason, in the same way it did against Buffalo last January, that the Ravens were going to have to step outside their comfort zone, right? It's just reality when you're playing great teams week after week after week in the postseason. I mean, that's just the way it's going to work. Bill Belichick famously, the famous term with him and his defense is what was that they'll force an opponent to play left-handed, right? They'll take away what they do best and then see how they do trying to adjust and do some other things that isn't considered their biggest strength. Well, we're seeing the Ravens not run the ball in the same way they had the last couple of years, and there are a lot of reasons why, but they're winning games. Why? Because their quarterback is throwing the ball at an incredibly high level, and it's not just because of him. As we mentioned, credit Mark Andrews, credit Marquise Brown, credit these other pass catchers.
I bet Greg Roman too, scheming this thing up to get guys.
No question about it. No question. I mean, that's the other thing too. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it really deserves to be said. And we talked about it last week. And I think last week it was especially true, but even on Monday night, this isn't just Lamar throwing into tight windows and receivers making highly contested catches, although we're certainly seeing that. Let's be clear. But we're seeing lots of examples where guys are getting wide open. And all right, how much of that goes down to Indianapolis was already down a starting corner, and then they lost Xavier Rhodes to a concussion. They're banged up, sure. But you know what? That's the league, right? I mean, the Ravens don't have Marcus Peters right now.
The whole idea is to confuse your Brandon Stevens and go beat him, literally. Yeah. Like Billick said, go after that little guy over there. Like he looks new.
Exactly. I mean, you're going to have that. I mean, the Colts picked on Anthony Averett, and Averett had played really well through the first 4 games of the season. So you just know that that's going to happen. But credit Greg Roman for, as much as he got so much criticism in the offseason, and some of it was fair, a lot of it was really unfair, in my opinion. I mean, you're talking about an offense that put up a boatload of points the last 2 years. That doesn't just happen by accident. So some of the criticism was really over the top, but clearly they needed to make some improvements and they needed to adjust. And they've been forced to do that this year because of the injuries and challenges they've faced early on. But they've done a fantastic job. And they use motion very well, so that teams that use motion, it's a great way to get a tell on whether your opponent's in man or zone. I mean, it's more often than not, it bears true. You can hide it and you can vary some things here and there, but ultimately that's why teams use pre-snap movement. They've used play action. And by the way, analytics will tell you, you don't need to establish the running game in order to use play action. Those play fakes, it's not as though the defense sits back and says, well, we know they're not running the ball very well, so we're not going to take into account this play fake whatsoever. No, you execute a good play fake, they have to respect it, and you execute it, and guys will be open. And we're seeing that with the Ravens. So even though they're not running the ball at the level we're used to seeing them run it, they're still using those principles that have worked so well the last couple of years, and you're seeing it show up even more with the passing game because it's a higher volume now. So you go back to it, and you made the point, and I don't disagree. Going into a game, you'd rather not throw 43 times, but it's so important for them to show this ability that they can do that because, well, the last couple of years, teams on occasion were able to contain their running game. It didn't happen often, but when it did, your first thought was, all right, what next? Well, we're seeing what next, and it's looked really, really impressive. And it's why at this point now, the postseason thing will be there until they're back in January and have their next opportunity. That's just reality. And by the way, that was true for Peyton Manning, who did not win a Super Bowl till what, year 8, I think it was, right? Year 8, year 9, whatever it was. His first 5-6 years in the league, he put up insane numbers. But what was the knock on him? Well, can't beat Tom Brady and the Patriots in the postseason. And that was true for a long time until it wasn't anymore.
Flacco lost 3 AFC championship games.
Yeah. But my point is that part of the narrative, yeah, that's going to be there. But in terms of the hypotheticals, can this guy throw more when he has to? Can this offense be productive when they're not running the ball at such a highly proficient level? They're answering those questions right now. So it's not to say that you don't want your running game to get better. And by the way, you continue to throw for 400 yards in a game. Teams they're not going to be stacking the box in the same way they've been trying to the last few weeks, where they've talked about how Detroit really tried to stop their run, how Vic Fangio and the Broncos really tried to stop their run. They're going to start seeing lighter boxes because they're going to say, we can't have Lamar Jackson throw for 400 yards on us. Well, guess what's going to happen then? Teams will adjust. You'll see some lighter boxes, and magically that running game will start looking better. I'm not saying it's going to look 2019 historically great, but you're going to see a give take here. You're going to see a push pull here where teams are going to start respecting their passing game way more because they need to. And the numbers are evident in that way. But when that happens, suddenly that box becomes lighter, and Latavius Murray is going to find more daylight. Tyson Williams is going to find more daylight. Lamar Jackson will find more daylight running the ball then. So it's a constant game of adjustments. We talk about that. I mean, that's every sport, right? But we've seen the Ravens adjust, and they've had to adjust with some of the injuries and challenges they've had personnel-wise. But teams are going to adjust to them now. And then I suspect we'll see their running game start to find its stride a little bit more, and that'll just make the Ravens that much more dangerous.
I'm just going to say this. No need to respond. We can talk about it later in the week. But Lamar took a lot of hits on Monday night, right? Like, to me, this style of him running around a little bit, I think he's more sore this week than he's been in a lot of weeks. I saw him taking more awkward hits, more hard hits out in open field. He didn't get a lot of run out of bounds, flip the ball to the official in throwing the ball like this. He took some hits. He got the cheap shot on the head at one point. So there's more of that going on for Lamar too. I want to point that out, that we are one hit away from all of this ending. And that I never lose sight of that when I see him getting up out of a pile, when I see Bradley Bozeman run over and say, are you all right? And Lamar has this, I'm going to play dead thing sometimes when he's ticked off, that he'll lay there for a minute. And that moment is, we've had a lot of that. I had that moment in Canton with you 4 years ago when he ran into the first pile against the Bears. There is a little bit of that is a little unsettling to me. And you know, like, he's not made of crepe paper, right? But I don't like seeing him get hit as much as he got hit Monday night, because that's the kind of game they had to play late Monday night, the scramble.
Yeah, and I would say, generally speaking, I think he's taken a few more hits. But I would also say your quarterback drops back 40 times, Patrick Mahomes. Hey, Joe Flacco suffered a torn ACL playing from the pocket. So it's kind of just reality. When you have, if you're not always up at night worrying, I mean, if you're John Harbaugh and the coaching staff, I guarantee you he has nightmares of Lamar Jackson getting hurt. I guarantee you he had nightmares of Joe Flacco getting hurt. If you're not having that kind of thought in the back of your mind when your quarterback takes a hit, chances are you don't have a franchise quarterback and you're not very good.
I've just seen these big guys, these Steve McNairs and these Cam Newtons, and, you know, just Andrew Luck. You know, and I talked about Peyton Manning last week, where, you know, Peyton stands and he's kind of crooked a little bit. It looks like Peyton's in pain all the time. You know what I mean? Like, just from the way his body is structured after the neck surgery, Lamar's getting hit more. And I just want to point that out. 4 years into this, I saw him taking more hard hits on Monday night than probably any other game I've seen him take, because of the style they had to play, that they were forced to play.
Yeah, and I would say that there's some validity to that. So, I mean, it's where they are right now. I mean, you got to win games, right? I mean, ultimately, you know, it's one thing to talk about that in the first quarter, but if it's a third quarter and you're down 3 scores, well, you know, you kind of throw that. You got to throw caution to the wind. I mean, it's It's really, you got to win the football game. And when you can't run, your running backs combined for, what was it, 24 yards on 11 carries? Well, it's going to be Lamar. And
no bueno.
it's crazy to think that you look at their total yardage and how much he himself was responsible for. I mean, I just said it. Their running backs had 24 rushing yards. He had the rest of their rushing yards. Of course, he had all their passing yards. I mean, boy, in the history of the franchise, one guy being responsible for that many yards from scrimmage, in terms of passing and rushing, incredible. Just
Justin
an
Tucker
absolute...
can't even kick it that far.
You're right.
Luke Jones is out in Owings Mills all week long. It's all brought to you by Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. And, of course, our Maryland Crab Cake Tour coming to Timonium, as the coach would say. We're going to be at Nick's Grandstand Grill on Friday from 2 until 5, celebrating Timonium, talking seafood, having a crab cake with my pal Tommy there from Cross Street in South Baltimore all the way up to Timonium. So come on out to Nick's on Friday. It's all presented by the Maryland Lottery. Let yourself play. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore positive.